let's talk about smut. So I did a smut recommendation video quite a while ago, but it was all like pretty hardcore smut, extreme smut that is very high on the BDSM or S&M or non-con sort of thing. That's the type of smut I gravitate towards more so than anything else. In this video, I wanted to talk about some more regular smut that I enjoy. Because while I do enjoy that sort of harder smut, I also enjoy other things beyond that, and I definitely can get sick of seeing the same sort of smut over and over again, because when you're reading like non-stop bully romances, they tend to get a little repetitious. So in this video, I'm going to recommend some other things that I've enjoyed. So the first one I want to talk about are the first two books in the Thorn Chapel series. I'm not going to go on about them too long because I feel like they've been talked about to death on BookTube, but that is A Lesson in Thorns and A Feast of Sparks by Simone. This series is all about a group of friends who kind of gravitate back towards this mansion called Thorn Chapel. They used to go there when they were kids, and their parents were all friends, and since then they've kind of all grown apart, but they all feel this gravitational pull back towards it, and they end up there, and then they just get into this really kinky orgy situation, essentially. There are some other like kind of groups that form. Poe, Auden, and St. Sebastian are one. Delphine and Rebecca are another, and then there's Beckett, who's just, I don't know, there for the thrills, I guess. There's also a mystery element, because Poe's mother has been missing since she was a child, and there's this mystery surrounding that. I particularly didn't care for that stuff. I mean, it was fine, but like I also knew that it was going to take a backseat to the smut, and it definitely does. What's really great about this series is that it's just written in a richer way than most smutty books are. It's very heavy on the atmosphere, and it's just very unique compared to most of the smut I've ever read, which I've read quite a bit. I like that it's very queer, and it's like open to talking about polyamory and female-female relationships, obviously, as well as just male-male relationships, etc. Bisexuality, BDSM, like it really explores a lot in a very short amount of time. There's also this like religious aspect to it that I don't really know a lot about, but it's definitely a fun time. I know a lot of people hated the second book. I happen to love it. I think it gave a lot more depth to Auden and St. Sebastian's relationship, which was necessary. And I love this series overall, and it's probably my favorite smutty series that I've ever read. The next thing I want to talk about is Willing Victim by Cara Mckenna. I picked this up on a whim. It is a tiny novella, and it ended up in my top 10 books of last year, as well as A Lesson in Thorns, for that matter. This is a book about two people who meet by chance, and he tells her that she should not be interested in him, and right away I thought that was a red flag, because I mean, we see that so many times, and usually the guy is an asshole. He's not. He's actually a pretty decent guy who just happens to like rougher sex. But the way he communicates his sexual taste is just so mature, and that feels groundbreaking in smut, because I feel like so often everything is so vague or just like over the top and like, here, sign this contract. But this just, they talk about sex in such a normal way. And their relationship feels like it grows in a normal way, and just, it was just such a breath of fresh air. I get so annoyed at the fact that so many authors write BDSM relationships as if their entire relationship dynamic is BDSM, where you can have a normal romantic relationship while having a BDSM sex life. And I feel like this book explores that well. I also just love Flynn as a character, because I'm so sick of seeing the same male love interest over and over and over again in dark erotica, where the guy's a rich asshole who has all these like issues from his past, and he's brooding, and like he's super intelligent, but like he's just a jerk that nobody should put up with. Whereas Flynn he's just a very simple-minded guy, and he works a regular job, He has just a normal everyday life. He's a happy guy, and I don't know, it was just so nice to see. Someone who can be happy but enjoy rough sex, and it doesn't have to be that big of a deal. Next thing I want to talk about is Credence by Penelope Douglas. I've talked a lot about how I'm not a huge Penelope Douglas fan. I just feel like her tastes don't go dark enough for me. I just feel like Penelope Douglas writes dark erotica for people who want it to be palatable. And that's great, it's just not necessarily what I'm looking for. There's nothing wrong with it, it's just not for me. I want things that are a little bit darker. But with Credence, I feel like this was finally a book that I could get behind. I feel like this was a truly unique smut book, especially to Penelope Douglas, especially because I've just read so many bully romances once again, and the first books I read by Penelope Douglas were Bully and Corrupt, which were both bully romances and felt very much like every other bully romance I'd ever read. Credence is about a girl whose parents commit suicide, and she ends up having to live with her uncle, but like they're not actually blood related. Just want to get that out of the way. They don't really know each other, but she's 17 or something, so she has to go off and live with her uncle and her two cousins. And she's this rich girl who is now living like in the middle of nowhere out in the wilderness, whatever. That setting was definitely a huge plus in this book. It was unique to the smutty stories. She really got to like find herself and like, you know, learn how to work and all that crap, learn how to be with herself, and also learn how to open up to other people because it's something she's never done before. And she also develops different relationships with all three of the guys there, her two cousins and her uncle. The thing about Penelope Douglas's romances is she really takes the time to flesh out relationships. I do feel like that's one of the things that wasn't quite done as well in this book. It's really fleshed out with one of the guys, and that's not who she ends up with, so it's kind of weird. I personally, once again, just like wasn't really into the smut in this book because I just find it's not steamy enough, but the book overall as a romance, I enjoyed the story, I guess is what I'm trying to say, and it was unique, and I read it really quick, and I hope Penelope Douglas stays down this route. The next two books that I want to talk about are kind of part of a series, and that is The Red and the Rose by Tiffany Reisz. The Red is essentially about a woman who owns an art gallery, and then this mysterious stranger comes in and like wants to fix all her money problems, and all he requires is for her to sleep with him, essentially in any way that he wants when he shows up. And he only shows up like once a month, if that. Now this girl's mom told her on her deathbed that she is to keep this art gallery open by any means necessary, so she decides to go along with this proposal, and this is has some of the most unique sex scenes that I've read, and I fell absolutely in love with it. I've actually read it twice now, and it just turns paintings into sex scenes, essentially, and it is just so fun. And I will say the characters are not well defined, not well fleshed out. This is basically just porn. But it is a fun time. Now, the second book, The Rose, is kind of a spin-off of The Red. It's not following the same characters, but it kind of is along the same ideas, except this has to do with Greek mythology instead of paintings. It's still fun. I feel like where the first book was all about lust and sex, the second book is more about love and romance. I really enjoyed the banter between the two characters. I feel like it was much more well-defined than the first one is. It just depends in what you want. Personally, I like lust, sex, steaminess more, so I like the first book more, but I do think both books were worth reading. The next book I want to talk about was Desperate Measures by Katee Roberts. I know a lot of people have talked about this series. This series is essentially smutty Disney retellings. This first book is the only one I've read from the series, but I did buy the second book and I'm really looking forward to reading it. This one is about Jasmine and Jafar. It has to do with kind of a daddy kink, which I find incredibly uncomfortable, personally. I have nothing against anyone who enjoys it, but I just, anytime she called him daddy, I was just like, oh, right, that's part of this thing. Okay. Not my favorite thing, but I felt like the book overall was just so enjoyable that I ended up giving it 4 stars anyway. The ending kind of sucks, but the two characters are written so well and their dynamic is just so good. And this is definitely like enemies to lovers. And I feel like most people would enjoy this. Next book I want to talk about is Take Me and Break Me by Cari Silverwood. This book starts off with a character who is an artist and a documentarian, and she decides that she wants to do this sort of documentary experiment where she will explore kind of the idea of being kidnapped, I guess, and the effects that that has on a person. So she enlists the help of her ex-boyfriend to kidnap her and hold her hostage in his basement. And from there, a month of sexcapades ensue. I really didn't know what I was in for with this book because I really just randomly picked it up. Normally I do at least a little bit of research, or like I've heard of the author, or I've heard of the book or something, or I've seen it on a list somewhere. This was just truly random. I think I was just like scrolling through Amazon Kindle Unlimited things and just like was like, sure, why not try this? And I love this so much. I will say I don't like the main character that much. I don't know if she was written to be likable. It kind of felt like she wasn't. But honestly, it doesn't matter. This is just porn. Like there's no story. They pretty much give up on telling any sort of story pretty quickly within this. I actually appreciated the male character's perspective. I feel like he was a little more well written, and you kind of see him discovering how much he likes this and how much he likes having control and all that. And every sex scene just ratchets up like the craziness that they're doing. Like they're just getting more and more in depth and like getting darker and darker as it goes, and I love that. And this definitely had some scenes in it that I haven't seen in smutty books before, and I very much appreciated that. I didn't like the rest of the series. I've read books 2 and 3, and I just feel like they didn't quite live up to what this first book had to offer. Although I do like most of the characters more in the second and third book. But I just really like this book overall, although I wish that the book had been entirely from his perspective. But definitely be warned, because this book is not for everyone. The next book I want to talk about is Double Trouble by Sierra Cartwright. This has to do with twin brothers who are looking for a girl that they can share. They find this girl that works at a bar, and they decide to have this like weekend getaway with her to see if it'll work out. Personally, I'm not into the whole twin thing. I actually find that super creepy and weird. But I enjoyed so much of this book that I still wanted to mention it. What I mostly enjoyed about this book is that they really talked about like polyamory and kind of what it's like to be in like a triad relationship, and I thought that was really cool and not something that I get to see explored a lot. And they also kind of talked about the difference between BDSM and S&M, and I appreciated that as well. That's pretty much all I have to say about that, because to be honest, most of the BDSM sex scenes are like any other BDSM smutty book that you're gonna read. And the last book I want to talk about is Arranged by R.K. Lilley. I absolutely loved this. This book is about an arranged marriage of sorts. Kind of a fake marriage. They both have their reasons for going into it. She needs money. He's getting this like ultimatum from his father about kicking him out of the company if he doesn't get married. They end up in this fake marriage that neither one of them really wants to be in. I feel like this is one of the rare instances of enemies to lovers where I can actually understand why they're enemies and why they don't like each other. Some of it is hypocritical, but people are hypocrites. It's totally believable for once, and I feel like that is very, very rare, especially in a contemporary romance. I will say the main guy is like a total asshole, like just one of the worst love interests, and that's saying something considering I read a lot of bully romances, but he's just such a dick to her. But I feel like it just works, and R.K. Lilley is great at writing a sex scene. I love the banter. I love watching the female character like learn to grow a spine and like stand up for herself. It's just really, really good. I definitely don't like the ending. I don't know if a lot of people are going to be able to like get through most of this because of what an asshole he is, but if you're looking for true enemies to lovers, I think this is where it's at. So those are all my suggestions for some good smutty novels. Hopefully you'll like one of them, and hopefully you'll come back again soon. Bye.